Welcome, everybody, to a brand new episode of IDTALK4ED Live, the show for the unsung heroes of education. I'm your host, Kwame Sarfo-Mensah. And if this is your first time tuning in to the podcast, I welcome you and I hope that today's episode is one that will have you coming back for more. And if you're a returning listener or viewer of the podcast, as always, I welcome you back and I hope that today's episode is one that you find informative, enlightening, and as always, insightful. So before we get into the main event, as always, if you are on YouTube, please hit that red subscribe button so you can get future notifications on new episodes. If you're listening from Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your podcast, make sure you subscribe there as well. Also, for those who want to submit monetary donations to help us build this platform, you could do that in 4 ways. If you are on Cash App, you could use the handle $IDTALK4ED. If you have Venmo, you can use the handle @KwameSM. If you have PayPal, you can use the URL paypal.me/KwameSM. And for my day ones who have been rocking with Aldaine Talk from the beginning, you can become a patron today by going on Patreon and finding Kwame Sarfo-Mensah or Aldaine Talk. You'll find me there. And over there, you'll get behind the scenes footage of episodes. You'll learn more about what we do with Aldaine Talk, and you'll get some other perks as a token of my appreciation. And to catch past and future episodes of the podcast, you can go to our main website at IDTALK4EDucators.com. And for my book lovers, if you're looking for a book to add to your 2025 book list, make sure you add Learn to Relearn, Supporting Identity in a Culture-Affirming Classroom. It's been amazing how much support I've been able to receive for this book. The feedback continues to be amazing. And once again, I thank everybody who's purchased a copy, who has shared the copy with their friends and has spread the word about the book to colleagues. Every ounce of support is greatly appreciated and it goes a long way. So for those who want to join this movement, you can order your copy today at any book retailer, whether it's Amazon, whether it's Barnes and Nobles, Rutledge directly, or any other retailer. You'll be able to find it there. And if you love what you read, please, please, please leave a 5-star review. You could go on Amazon to do that, or you can go to Goodreads. Either one should work out. And you can go to the main website, learntorelearn.com, to learn more about what's inside the book. And you'll be able to have access to some free learning resources. Thank you all again. All right, y'all. So we got another powerful episode coming up today. And this brother right here is somebody who I've been following for a little bit. And I'm excited to have him come on to talk about his journey and let us know how he does this work that we love called education. So I'm not even going to waste any time. I'd like to bring on Aldaine Wynter to the podcast to talk with us about his journey and what brings us to the show today. So let's bring the brother on so we can have this conversation. Yes, sir. Good morning.
Good morning. How are you doing?
I'm doing all right. How you feeling?
Energized.
Yes. So listen, thank you for coming on. I've been excited again to this episode. I know off air we talked about how we've been having some busy schedules of late, but nothing was going to stop me from having this conversation today. This is something that I've been waiting for. So, man, thank you. All right. So we like to start from the beginning on this podcast. And I know for you, I mean, right now you are in the DMV area, I believe, right now, stateside. But we know that you're coming originally from the UK. and we want to make sure we go back in time. So let's start from the beginning. Talk to me about that early upbringing and what ultimately inspired you to want to become an educator of all things.
That's a good question. So if we start from the beginning, I
Yes,
was
sir.
one of your traditional, your mother expects you to be a doctor, an engineer, and I picked engineering initially. So my undergrad is actually in engineering, and I enjoyed studying it. It was great. I had the opportunity to work in Shanghai as an engineer, and then I worked in Oxford as a structural engineer. But there was always something that in the back of my head that told me this is a bit boring. As corporate as I thought I was at the time, I definitely felt this sense of wanting to make an actual difference. And something that I was doing in the background was gymnastics. So I was a former gymnast, and I eventually became an elite gymnastics coach for women's gymnastics, like age 6 to 11. And I just love seeing the progress. You know, you start when they're like 4 or 5 years old, can barely forward roll, and then 3 years later they're flipping, and their spatial awareness is insane. And so I thought, okay, how do I translate that into something I can be super passionate about in my actual job? So I moved from education, so from engineering to education. So I ended up doing, in the UK, we do PGCE, which is a postgraduate certification in education. And I did mine actually in maths and physics. So I was able to do it in 2 different subjects. And then from there, it was a no-brainer. I was lucky enough to have a placement in a private school, have really good mentors. And then my first ever job was in an international school in London, which is quite rare, but I had an amazing opportunity to start in an IB setting. And now I'm here in DC, loving life.
And I know for you, you kind of gave a Cliff Notes version, but just getting back to your gymnastics coaching, I know in your case, you had a chance to coach in the States because you were just so awesome at it. And if I'm not mistaken, it was around that time where you started to think about teaching. So if you could just tell the audience, what was it about that experience of coaching gymnastics that influenced your decision to want to go into education?
I don't even remember telling you that. You've got some great researchers.
Come on, this is what I
Yeah,
do,
so
man.
so I had the opportunity to come in 2012. So during the London Olympics, I wanted to, weirdly enough, get away, and I just wanted to be stateside and see what was happening. And so I worked in a very, very famous gymnastics center in Pennsylvania, and it was just intense work for a year, working with really talented gymnasts and amazing coaches from around the world. I got to meet one of my own Olympic heroes, Nastia Lukin, whilst I was in the States. So it was one of those once in a lifetime, meet your heroes, learn everything that you could possibly learn about gymnastics. And whilst coaching in the day, we were also counselors during the evening. So we had a good blend of the sports, the skills, the technical side of gymnastics, but also the humanity, the kind of what are the children doing at night and how they're feeling being away from home. Because for a lot of them, they're away from home for either the first time or just a really long amount of time. Some were spending 8 weeks away from their family. And so you were that touch person to make sure that they were okay, as well as coach them to ensure the skill development that they were there for. And so for me, education, it was natural. It was a sense of, I'm teaching you something, but I'm also taking care of you holistically. You are more than just a gymnast. You are a young child who is really trying to be the best version of yourself, alongside coaches are trying to be the best version of themselves. And so for me, it was a natural bridge between coaching gymnastics to education. The only difference was I would not teach physical education as my specialist subject, because I only knew gymnastics and wasn't a huge fan of football or soccer. And so it was the case of what you get at, what you're passionate about. Maths and physics was a was an easy sell. So it was easy to say, okay, take your skills of seeing development, liking how a student can be on day one and how they are on day 365. What are you going to put in place? Really personalizing the plan. Like gymnasts, you need to approach them individually. And the same way students in the classroom, you need to approach them individually. You know, they all have the same aim, right? They want to win a medal, but the way in which they can do that, the path that they take, that's what's going to be different, and that's what we need to be true to.
For sure. And we'll get back to the educator journey, but I'm curious to know about your own schooling, going through primary, secondary in the UK. If any, what were some experiences that you had as far as getting to know your identity and embracing it? Were there any struggles that you experienced growing up with regard to that, as far as being able to show up in different settings?
I think for me, I was quite lucky. I was in a school where I was the first year. So it was a brand new school. So I was always the oldest. So we grew with the school. The teachers, who were also brand new, knew the first years incredibly well. So I didn't necessarily struggle, is the honest truth. I was always in a position where the teachers put me in spaces where I could do well and succeed. I met a lot of politicians. I was invited to a lot of government events purely based on the fact that our school was new and we were receiving a large amount of funding at the time from the City of London. And so whenever there was a banquet, my face was there. It was probably the first time that I ate caviar was at these events. Our teachers, taught us how to interact with politicians and how you network, how you engage in conversation. So we just had a really interesting, they had an interesting approach because of how we were and the fact that we knew in our connections to certain corporate entities within the city. So it wasn't really a struggle. So between the school putting a really good foundation for us to know how to network and how to speak to people, I came from a home that was very much, you can do what you want, but you need to work hard. And the idea of traveling was really important. So we as a family traveled a lot every year. Any traveling opportunity that was available from school, my mother made it happen. I learned how to sail and got a sailing qualification, kayaking qualification. I love to ski, and I ski almost every year purely based on the fact that we used to go skiing in school. So it was taking opportunities and really allowing them to shape the future. And I think the one that really solidified that is I got accepted onto something called the Prime Minister's Global Fellowship, which doesn't exist anymore, but it sent about 100 students to either China, India, or Brazil. And we were there to learn either the language and the culture. And we also got an internship with a global company that had a London base and a base in either Brazil, China, or India. And so I went to China. I interned with Arup, an engineering firm. And I had the opportunity to learn Mandarin in a school in Beijing, and then I was working in Shanghai. So I'm just really grateful for the opportunities and the international perspective that I gained through those various opportunities.
Hi friends, it's me, Thaddeus from Thaddeus Nature Notebook. Are you loving our journey into the wild and learning all about awesome animals? Then don't forget to subscribe. You can find Thaddeus Nature Notebook on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify. Just hit that subscribe button and never miss a new episode. And if you're on YouTube, give us a thumbs up and leave a comment about your favorite animal. Thanks for listening and exploring nature with me. Let's keep discovering together. Now back to my daddy's cell.
So during your time in China, was it around that time that you started to think about getting into international teaching?
No, ironically, that was when I was thinking that I was going to just move to China as an engineer. Gotcha. So the idea of education didn't come up until maybe 4 years later. Okay. The plan was always to come back to the UK, get my master's in like nanotechnology, and then go back to Shanghai because I had the network, I knew the companies that I needed to go for, and I was just going to do that.
All right.
It didn't happen,
So then,
but that was the plan.
So then what was the turning point for you?
I wasn't gravitating towards the engineering jobs that I had. I think the people had a huge impact. You felt a sense of almost jealousy. You know, I was the youngest in all of the teams that I was working in, both in Shanghai and in Oxford. And I was in the same position as adults in the room that were probably 10, 15 years my senior. And so there was definitely this sense of like, how were you able to do it? Or why are you moving so quickly? Why are you so confident? And the sense of everything we do is for profit also didn't sit well with me. I couldn't see anything beyond the money. And it was important for me to see that what I was doing was making some form of difference. And I couldn't quite see it in those settings. And then that's when I had to make the choice about like what I was going to do my master's in. It was I had like 3 different master's choices, 2 of which would have brought me more into the corporate world. And then one, which is the one I eventually took, that would bring me into education.
And see, this is why you and I connect, because I was a math teacher in the classroom, taught at the middle levels for a decade, went to school for math as well. And I know you also taught math for a few years as well. So when you were starting out, were there any intentions of getting into leadership right away, or was that something that evolved over time and you just stuck on it?
I'm super competitive and I'm a perfectionist. So the idea of climbing was always going to be a thing, but I did want to spend a few years, you know, relaxing, understanding the craft, and especially if your first teaching post is in an international private school, you recognize the difference between like being in a class as of 15, the ability to experiment, the ability to really personalize the journey for your students. And so I just wanted to sit in that for a few years and just really be the best teacher that I could be. Especially, I had models in my mind about teachers I super respected, like 2 of which I still speak to today. And then others who I didn't respect, and I wanted to avoid them at all cost and not be those archetypes, especially in maths where it's seen as you're either good or you're not. And I wanted to kind of go away from that. But no, I was fortunate enough to be in a school where the head saw my potential really early on, to the point where they really pushed me to do my master's whilst I was still in my first year of teaching. They said, we suggest you do your master's now. And so I took it on board. I did my master's. And from that point, every year there were at least 1 or 2 opportunities where they said, you should do this because. And at the time, it wasn't clear if they were crafting a path that was going to lead me towards more like an assistant principal for academics or an assistant principal for like pastoral and safeguarding. They were really just laying the foundation for leadership from year 1.
Yeah. And as I was looking at your trajectory, compared to most people, I feel like you had more of an expeditious trajectory into leadership, which is rare, especially for, brothers like you and I, you know what I'm saying? So I'm wondering if there were particular mentors or role models, that were at the school that really put that bug in you to want to pursue these opportunities, because they don't just come that early on in our careers.
Yeah, it's true. I know that the reason why I was able to accelerate so quickly is I had people who wanted me to. They wanted me to succeed. I think about the roles I've had, and the first senior role I had was the first of that type. It was brand new. It had been slightly adjusted from the previous. So I was the head of pastoral, and prior to that, we had dean of students. I was the first head of pastoral. Before even going to that, I was actually the assistant head of pastoral, which is a brand new role that they'd created for me. So I've always been in a position where people are seeing my talents and wanting to cultivate it. That role was head of pastoral. That was my first in leadership, and I was only 26, 27. And being in charge of children's safeguarding and mental health at that age and having to convince parents is a big task. But if the head sees faith and belief in you, then you have no choice but to believe in yourself. And then I went from that role to head of operations and pastoral at another school. Again, a curated role that they made just for me. And then I ended up in Washington, D.C., as the director of International Mindedness, Diversity and Inclusion, which wasn't made for me, but it was an inaugural role. So it was the first time that the role had been posted. So my journey is really weird, but like I said, I'm competitive. I love a challenge and I love people. Every role that I've done in leadership has involved people, and
Yes.
people around me allow me to be successful, is what I would say. I can take all the credit, but realistically, they could make it hard for me. So,
yeah, for sure. And I know when you do end up getting a leadership position, that's just the title.
Mhm.
You still need time to develop your own identity and grow into that role. So, in all the different opportunities you've had in leadership, what has been your process for discovering your voice, specifically as a Black international school leader? Because that's a layer that people really don't understand unless they've had to experience it themselves. So I don't know what your interactions were with other colleagues or even with students, but I'm wondering how that manifested itself in the different roles you've had throughout your career.
That's a really good point. I always recognize that, especially stepping into senior leadership at my first role, I'm always either the most senior or the only. So when I first got into my school, I was probably, I believe, the only Black teacher. And then as I climbed the ranks, I then became the most senior Black teacher as others started to come in, especially when I left my first international school. There were quite a few Black teachers, which made me incredibly proud, but I was still the most senior. And when I went into my second school and I took a slight hiatus away from international education and I went into a very traditional private boys' school in England, I was the most senior Black teacher in the school. And I remember one day walking into one of the maths classes, because I was just kind of giving some documents to another one of my colleagues. And one of the Black students was like, "Oh, wow, we've never had a Black teacher in 7 years of being in the school." And weirdly enough, that school, there were 3 Black teachers and all of them were in maths. And then you had the head of maths, myself as an assistant principal, and then another maths teacher. So that was a really interesting space. Like, it was an incredible place to do maths, but the students clearly saw that there weren't many before. You could feel it in how they would treat you. You know, you'll always have grace and respect from those who see themselves represented in you. Then it's up to you to convince the rest, is kind of how I felt in that setting. But I always carry myself knowing that, yes, I'm Black, but it feels different in different spaces. For example, being in the US, I'm Black, but I'm not African American. And that does make a difference. And I'm, this idea of being a Black Brit or Black European, however they see me, there's an understanding that you're not American. And so therefore you need to show us that you recognize that and you're going to work in a way in which tells us that you care. And that's about understanding the history of the place that you're in and not doing the stereotypical international thing where you put yourself in a bubble and you just take your culture and you ignore where you are. I read a lot extensively around American history, African American history at that. And it plays into the initiatives that I have in the school. I have the opportunity my role is it's not DEI, it's IDI. And that international mindedness piece comes first. And so I always think about, when I do an initiative, am I considering the international piece without, ignoring the fact that we're an international school in America. And I am who I am. I walk in a room and you see You see that I'm a Black teacher. The way I carry myself also represents that. I'm a perfectionist in everything, in what I do, in what I wear, and what I look like, and the people I choose to collaborate and speak to, like yourself. I have to believe in what's happening around me. Otherwise, it's hard to sell.
Absolutely. It's all about authenticity for sure. Now, you brought this up, and this actually leads me to this question, because going back when you first came to the States in the capacity of a gymnastics coach, I'm wondering if that first time in the States was a culture shock, because in the UK, when you think about the UK and the US, there are some parallels and similarities. There's a great deal of racism. There's a history of that. We could even talk about Windrush. We could talk about some of these other events that have happened throughout parts of the UK. And we know what happens in the States as far as Jim Crow and civil rights movement. But I'm wondering, when you first got to the States, were there certain things that surprised you or shocked you? I don't know.
The only thing that shocked me was the fact that I was 18 and I couldn't drink. America's 21 age cap
21, yep.
is obscene. But that was probably the only thing that was shocking, because we were really bubbled. The gymnastics community, we came and we were working essentially 6.5 days a week. Okay. We had half a day where we were able to explore, but as an international person, none of us drove, so we had to know someone, and it was everything that we needed was on this site, and so there was not much to be shocked by because we didn't really leave. And again, I think when we describe this idea of being Black and international, there is a real difference between being Black and being British. There is still this cultural admiration for British culture, especially in the States. So I've been to a lot of events where I can open my mouth and that will be enough for me to get 5 different cards and speak to all the people in the room. And I recognize that there's a difference between that and someone else who might come from a different place in the world and how they are perceived, if they are in the exact same room for the exact same reasons. So I'm not ignorant to that.
And then in speaking about international mindedness, so when people talk about a DEI, and we know that IDI is a separate term and conversation, but I'd love for you to just share with the audience, what do you mean by international mindedness? I have an idea of what it is, but for a lot of our audience members who may not have heard the term IDI, could you just provide some context for what that is?
Yeah, I think when we consider DEI, and this is someone who was the global lead for DEI for Dwight schools, and I had to coordinate the initiatives along Dwight schools in New York, London, Shanghai, Korea, online, and London. This idea that I basically take off one hat and put on another when I think about DEI. When I was in London, I was thinking about, okay, what does it mean in this context? When I was working in New York, I was thinking about it in that context. Shanghai, the same thing. The international mindedness piece allows me to think about myself in America, but figuring out what elements can I take and pull that are going to be significant for the community that I'm currently serving. So, for example, we've just come off of Black History Month, and WIS is a very international school, not just their students, but we've got faculty and staff that come from Spanish-speaking countries, from Francophone countries, because we have a Spanish and French immersion in early years, and then we switch into a bilingual program from grade 1. And so for Black History Month, I opened with a West African dance company who performed at the different divisions. And that was kind of the sense of let's look at the international. And then we also had initiatives that looked at historically Black colleges and universities, because we also wanted to understand the significance of where we are in DC and the fact that we've got Howard down the road. And so there's a blend of the international part of what it means to be diverse and inclusive. Some schools are incredibly diverse, but they don't necessarily have that international component. We have the international component. And it's to stay true to that and acknowledge the fact that with that comes different cultures, and we need to ensure that we listen and we are trying to bring in all the different cultures and understand, this is yours, this is mine. We are in America. What does it mean?
The Aldaine Talk for Educators Live podcast is just one piece of the work that we do under Aldaine Talk Consulting, which we've had since 2019. And since then, we've had the privilege of working with 40 different schools, districts, and organizations across the globe. And we want to continue to add to that number in this new year. So if you are a school, if you're an educator or an organization that's looking to receive professional development and consulting services within any of our pillars, whether it's anti-bias, anti-racist practices, culturally responsive teaching, or identity affirming education, we are the firm for you, and we love to learn more about your needs. When you have a chance, make sure you go to our website at IDTALK4EDucators.com to learn more about our services and to schedule a discovery call today. We love to hear from you. Now, considering what you just mentioned, I want to remind the audience that you are in Washington, D.C.
Mm-hmm.
And you are very much aware of what's been happening with the new administration over these past couple months. And part of what's been going on has been about severing like international ties with different countries globally. And we're sitting here talking about international mindedness. So naturally, my question is going to be, how has the executive orders and all the things that have happened close to where you are at Washington International School, how has that impacted maybe your work and the school's work with regard to pushing this mission of international mindedness?
I think I would start by saying I'm lucky enough to have a head of school and an associate head who care about the work. I generally think that they do. And as a result, they've allowed me the ability to push through. We are fortunate compared to most where the executive orders themselves haven't had an impact on my ability to do my work. It doesn't stop me from that because a lot of the executive orders are linked to federal funding, of which we don't.
That's right.
We don't have. And so what I found we've been doing is being just louder and prouder of the work that we do, and really being transparent, particularly with the parents, about like, this is why you should believe in our mission statement and our values, because we are staying true to them at a time where a lot of schools aren't. And I think that's what makes us unique. That's not to say that it's not going to have an impact on our families, because the makeup of our families, given where they work, there is going to be an impact. But what they can feel rest assured in is that their children are going to be safe with us. We had an initiative with our elementary school children and the Human Rights Campaign last month, where we had the president of the HRC come and read. Well, we went to their headquarters and they read a storybook to us. Like, we went to the United Nations this week with 6 of our grade 9 students, where we had a UN conference, and the students got to hear about the impact of artificial intelligence from amazing speakers and current UN permanent secretaries, with other students from around the world, from Australia, Hong Kong, England, Mexico. And again, we promoted that. We are standing, I would say, in our truth when it comes to, you said that this is important to you 5 years ago, and it's still going to be important to you now. And we're going to ensure that we put ourselves in a position to let you know what we're doing, so that you can be proud of the place you're sending your kids when everything is said and done.
And I got to give you your flowers, brother, because the work you've been doing in these different schools has been nothing short of phenomenal. You did talk about the Dwight School back in London, and I know that with the work that you and your team were able to do in the DI department, it led to some tremendous honors. And then you're continuing this work here at the Washington International School. So I have to ask you, as someone that's been able to experience success, and I'm sure some challenges along the way, in your perspective, what makes a quality DEI, DEIJ program at an international school? And I'm only asking this because we know of a lot of colleagues who hold similar positions who have had to deal with their share of challenges to the point where those departments in their schools have either been closed down or shut down in some shape or form. So that's why I want to pose that question to you.
Oh, that's a good question. So I would say very easily, I think every school deserves to have DEI within it. Not every school is ready to undertake it.
That's right.
You know, as a leader of DEI, you need to be conscious of whether you are entering a hostile environment when it comes to DEI, whether you're going in a place that is sustainable for it. And you could either be a true fighter and someone who's able to go in and change culturally a hostile school, or you're someone who is going to go to a place because, you know, from a professional development point of view, you're going to be able to get what you need and then leave. I've always been under the impression that I want to leave behind a framework that will allow for sustainability when it comes to DEI and when it comes to this diversity and inclusion, whether that's policies and whether that's culture. And I've been in a position where I've really taken a note of the heads of school and their gut reaction when it comes to diversity and inclusion and where they put it on their pedestal. And I've been in schools where the heads of school have either been incredibly for it, and so therefore are willing to let you experiment, which is kind of what you alluded to when I was in London. And we were able to build an inclusive curriculum that highlighted Black voices and histories from preschool to year 13, which is your grade 12 in the States. And we did win an award from the Independent Schools Association. And it was the first time they'd given the award, and we were the first ones to receive it. And the school became a case study for them. And I actually sit on the ISA DEI committee. So I still do work with the institution, who is more European focused. And then I think about the institution where I'm at now, where we have not just the confidence of the head of school, but my budget reflects that they mean business. The things I'm able to achieve, it's not sheer luck, it's planning, and it's being able to put in the required finances to make it successful and sustainable.
All right, well, I know for you, you're a competitive guy. You've already proclaimed that. So let's project here as we start to wrap things up. I want you to think about the next decade, right?
Oh,
We could do 5 years. We could chunk it. We could chunk it to 5, right? In thinking about these next 5 years, I want you to tell me, what do you envision your role is going to be in the evolution of IDI work or DEI, right? In international education? How do you envision your role is going to either evolve or be what it is right now?
Okay, so the reason why I react how I did to 10 years is only because technically I am in year 10 now of just education. And so when you talk about this whole, you know, you've sped through quite quickly, you're not wrong. And so it's really difficult, because if you'd asked me 10 years ago, I wouldn't have told you that I would be in the position I'm in now. So sure. I'm almost at 10 years. I think I'll be in 10 years at the end of August. So in 5 or 10 years.
I'm surprised it's not 10 years already. It feels like it's been 10, all you've been doing. My goodness.
I'm a busy bee, but no, it's not even, we're not near 10 yet, and I refuse to round up because then that's going to show my age. But the next 5 to 10 years is about taking what I've had the pleasure of doing and supporting other schools. You know, I'm a big believer in, when people come and support, mentor, then they need to have their own kind of history of success in order to be able to help, whether it's an individual or an organization. Like, I've always been really eager to support and mentor like people who look like us, people who don't look like us, but are just super passionate about education. I really want to spearhead girls in maths, in engineering. That was a big thing that I was a fan of when I was teaching maths, and then when it became being a Black person in leadership. And I recognized that my path wasn't necessarily typical, but I know that there are elements of it that I can pass on to someone else in order to get them to understand like how the international sphere works. And so for me, the next 5 years is about, you should be able to do Identity Talks Part 2, and it should be about me mentoring and helping individuals be leaders in the space. You know, I'm present on social media, you'll know that, and I love my IDI video profiles where we get to like take members of the community and just talk to them. A new episode coming out tomorrow. But it's just I want to be able to make an impact on people in a meaningful way. Like I'm successful. I don't need anyone to tell me. I take a lot of pride in my work, and I want to be a part of other people's success. I want to be able to be in a position where people feel confident to say they're going to send a call, send a message, say, hey, I'm thinking this, what do you think? You know, the same way that I still have people who, if I'm not sure about something, I will get on a call and say, hey, I'm thinking about this. Is it insane? What do you think? 10 years, I'm going to be the leader. You will know my name. Simple.
Talk about it. Talk about it. Okay. I love the confidence. Listen, I want to wrap up with this question, and it's a question that I ask everybody on this podcast. How do you stay true to the teacher in you?
That's a good question. I think in the States, it's even harder. In the UK, you can be in leadership, you can be a principal, a head of school, but you'll always almost still be teaching. In the US, there is this sense of like, sometimes you don't always get the opportunity to teach. And I see the benefit in that. I see my ability to be able to do certain initiatives without fear of, okay, did I mark something? Are they caught up on the curriculum? And so for me, it's about really speaking to the teacher. I'm a whole school role, and so I work with early years all the way through to kind of diploma high school teachers. So sometimes going to the classroom, speaking about how they're doing, being in their planning meetings, so that when I'm thinking about my initiatives, I'm not thinking about it from well, this is going to work because I want it to work, and I'm actually considering that they've got reports to write, that they really have curriculum that's been set 6 months in advance. If I do an assembly, am I taking away class time, or am I able to do it in a way that complements what they're doing? Can I be a bit more collaborative? Because do I think I'm going to be in the classroom anytime soon? No, I think I spent my time there, but I never want to lose sight of what it means to be an educator, a teacher at that, and the impact that my work potentially has on a team.
Yeah, for sure. It always will stay with us, no matter how long you stay away from the classroom physically. It always stays with you.
Absolutely.
Always does. Listen, Aldaine, thank you. Thank you. This has been an amazing conversation. We're going to have to find some time to do it again, but I want to make sure that you have an opportunity to let people know how they can connect with you, and also put the plug in on the IDI video profiles at WIS. Let people know how they can connect with you on that.
Oh, these are great. Yeah, so I am very active on LinkedIn. So if you search Aldaine Wynter, I'm sure it's going to appear on a screen here. Maybe. We'll see how your tech skills are. So yeah, Aldaine Wynter on LinkedIn. I'm on it. If you want to send a message, please do. The IDI video profiles, if you've not seen them already, you can find them through Washington International School's YouTube page, and you'll see just my face with loads of amazing members. We do a video profile every month, depending on the Heritage Month, and there are only about 3 to 5 minutes, really short, and this gives a little glimpse into what it means to be at WIS. So thank you, appreciate it.
Yeah, and thank you for sharing that. And I've had a chance to watch a few of the video profiles, and they really are good. You all have to check them out, please. But listen, brother, I'm going to let you go on with the rest of your day. Thank you again for coming on the podcast. And everybody else, thank you all for tuning into the podcast. On behalf of Aldaine, I'm going to wish you all a good morning, good afternoon, good night, wherever you are in the world. And we are going to do this again another time. Peace out, everybody.